Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Recap with Mac, where we're going to go over the drama in DC for this week. We have my co-host and amazing creative advocate, I can't even point, Jennifer Gillis. And then we have the lovely Miss Bev Scheckman from the Doctor-Patient Forum. And then we have Mr. Mac Haddow from the American Creative Association. And then over there in the corner, we have Miss Claudia Morandi from the Doctor-Patient Forum. How are y'all doing today on this fine Saturday?
Good. We're happy to hang out with some Kratom people for a bit, hear what happened in DC.
Can't wait.
Well, thank y'all for joining us. Thank y'all.
All right, Mr. Haddow, you ready to talk about? Oh, let me start off with a question I got for you. Claudia and Bev, how long can you stay with us today? Do you know? Do you have a exit time?
I don't usually stay long anywhere, so I'll be here for about. I'm the first to arrive and the first to leave at everything, including parties.
She'll stay. She'll be fine. She just needs to tell herself she's leaving in 10 minutes and she'll be fine.
Yeah.
Okay, Mr. Haddow. Another critic is Andrew Kolodny, with whom you've had several intense public discussions with, including at the 5th Annual Kratom Symposium at the University of Florida in February. And again this week after the AKA Congressional Briefing. What was up with that? What was it that I saw that y'all were going in on?
So I actually interrupted the conversation in Washington, D.C. that was going on between Dr. Rahul Gupta, the former director of the Office of National Drug Control Policy at the White House under President Biden, and Andrew Kolodny, because I overheard, as I was finishing an interview, Kolodny criticizing what Dr. Gupta was saying with respect to Kratom, claiming that Kratom deaths were out of control, and of course, Dr. Gupta was explaining that these Kratom deaths are being mischaracterized and that they are not accurate in terms of an assessment made by the medical examiners and coroners, upon which the data has been amalgamated by the CDC. And so I stepped in, and of course, Kolodny was asserting the claim that every single one of those deaths is evidence of an out-of-control epidemic of Kratom overdoses. And so when I stepped in, Dr. Gupta made a quick exit. He actually was being held up from getting to another appointment anyway. But this is an extension of the discussion that I've had with Dr. Kolodny. Just a bit of background. Dr. Kolodny, as both Claudia and Bev know well, made his entree into the addiction world by actually manipulating what happened in the pain control space with opioids, where he was the architect largely of reducing availability of valuable pain prescription medications to patients by restricting access. And he demonized opioids and made a fortune in actually testifying at various hearings about the dangers of opioids, and then became, after that dried up, he became a consultant to various local and state jurisdictions on how they could collect settlement money to do it. And now that money's pretty much drying up from a consulting basis, and his new target is Kratom, and he's using the same playbook. This is about being able to mischaracterize so-called Kratom deaths, relying upon large databases that do not accurately portray what is actually happening in the lives of these people that are looking to find some solutions. And I pointed out to Mr. Kolodny, hey, look, bottom line here is that data set is invalid for the purpose for which you were trying to use it. We've seen multiple examples of where this hasn't happened. And then he acts surprised when I pointed out the very database he was using, the Centers for Disease Control, had previously done a similar amalgamation of this information, and they themselves analyzed it and said that of the so-called 152 Kratom-related deaths, only 7, according to the CDC, based on the reports from the medical examiners and coroners, were Kratom only. And so a look behind was done of those 7. And of those 7 Kratom-only deaths, for which there were 4 blood samples available, so 3 had to be excluded, but of the 4 Kratom-only deaths, when they took the blood samples and exposed them to tests that are more sophisticated than the average medical examiner coroner would have in their offices, they found that all 4 of them were polydrug use. So there wasn't a single death that could be attributed to kratom only. And he interrupted and said, "Oh, these medical examiners and coroners are not going to be lying." And I said, "I never suggested they lied. I told you that they're mischaracterizing them because they don't have the equipment, nor do they have the analytical tools. And by the way, we're now in the middle of this hysteria that's being created by the likes of you, Dr. Kolodny, claiming that these people are dying of kratom when they're not. And we can prove this over and over." And he challenged me, and I explained to him some very specific examples of these autopsies that have demonstrated that in fact these deaths aren't accurate. And during the presentation that we made at our congressional briefing, there was a detailed analysis given about 5 or 6 of the high-profile so-called kratom deaths that are being claimed by parents who are weaponizing their grief in order to be the basis for banning kratom. And each one of those autopsies is inadequate to prove the point that Kolodny was making. He finished his argument by saying that kratom is an opioid. And he pointed out to me that he could line up 100 professional clinicians, all of whom would agree with him that kratom is an opioid. And I said, "Okay, let's get Jack Henningfield." Jack Henningfield was standing a few feet away from me, engaged in another conversation. I interrupted that, and I said, and of course, Jack didn't know it was coming. I said, "Jack, in your opinion, is kratom an opioid?" And Jack said, "Absolutely not." And he explained in detail why it is not properly characterized as an opioid. And Kolodny said, "Oh, well, you're wrong. You're wrong." I said, "You just told me you could line up 100 professional clinicians who would confirm what you just said. And here's one of the top scientists in the world on kratom. And he just explained to you why legally, chemically, and botanically, it is not properly classified as an opioid." And then Kolodny said, "Well, Scott Gottlieb said it was an opioid."
So
I said, "Yeah, Scott Gottlieb was wrong." And he not only was wrong from the standpoint of characterizing it that way, when his superior at the Department of Health and Human Services, Dr. Jawad, who was the Assistant Secretary for Health, called him out on it, it was Gottlieb who got ticked off about it and argued, but then he had to retreat. So you're using this ridiculous 2016 characterization that was inaccurate at the time as your basis for calling it an opioid today.
does he ever explain, not saying that there's other people who will say it's an opioid, because most of those other people, and I've heard probably close to 100, they're all funded by, they're all in organizations or universities heavily funded by funds that come from Indivior in a roundabout way. And so they're going to say that. But does he ever explain scientifically how he says it's an opioid?
No, he's
Right.
relying upon characterizations that are inaccurate and generalized. Does kratom? He did raise this point. He said, "Are you denying that kratom has opioid effects?" I said, "Kratom has opioid-like effects, like Tylenol does. So, are you going to classify Tylenol as an opioid?" And he got flustered. And I said, "Well, it's worse for you, Andrew. Are you going to classify cheese as an opioid?" Because his response back was, anything that activates the mu opioid receptors in your brain, anything, is an opioid. I said, cheese activates your mu opioid receptors. Now, granted at a low level, but they activate them. Are you calling that an opioid? And he didn't say, "Well, you're just being ridiculous." I said, "No, actually, you're being ridiculous. I'm merely using the reference point that you claim as the basis for calling it an opioid." This is a guy who is committed to one thing: making money for himself, trying to elevate himself along the way. Now, the one other thing that he did say to me, Bev, and you'll be interested in this. He said, "I do not appreciate your telling people that I was sanctioned by any research group for publications that I made by saying that I had to then rescind my credentials." I said, "Well, you misstated that. What I said was you didn't disclose that you, in fact, were receiving funding from various groups that you did not disclose on your mandatory disclosures on those research papers." He goes, "Well, it's not fair to say that I was sanctioned because I voluntarily submitted those updates and corrections." And I said, the key test then is what motivated you to do so. Why did you submit it? Why didn't you disclose it at the outset? And he goes, well, I said, are you saying that you just came an epiphany in the middle of the night? Or did someone point out to you that maybe you need to correct what your disclosures were ethically? And he said, well, you're just splitting hairs. I said, no, I'm not. This is the bottom line. You were, in fact, sanctioned. And I said, now, let me tell you, well, I said, you were, had to make a correction. He was taking exception to my characterization. He was sanctioned. Nice. I said, this is like a prosecutor telling you, you can either plead guilty or I'm going to take you to court and get a guilty plea, guilty finding against you. I said, you just were advised that you had made a mistake and you corrected it. I said, but worse, you sit in courts all over the country and you have made claims that are outside of your expertise. And you have been challenged in court with motions against you, and you've been limited in what you're allowed to say before the courts. So you're willing to say virtually anything. And now the only constraint that in our discussion today is that you're not in court, and I don't have a judge to tell you that you're outside of your lane on expertise, but you're willing to say these things here without any restraint. And
yeah, I mean, Mac, he was just on a podcast a few days ago, and you can see the litigation narrative coming out of him. Like he said probably 6 times that kratom is an opioid. Now, this was a podcast about prescription opioids and the opioid crisis, and he pushed it to that that there's a huge spike in opioid use disorder because of kratom now. And he just states it as fact, which is not true because I haven't seen any numbers. And then he also said that kratom is kratom is an opioid. There's a huge spike in it because of kratom, of opioid use disorder, and that people are now seeing this huge amount of like treatment due to kratom and opioid use disorder. And I think he's doing that so that settlement funds from like prescription opioid litigation can go to kratom groups. Like if he says these things, if he says it's an opioid use disorder, then clearly they can take funding to keep talking about it like that. And those groups can take it, like Kratom Danger Awareness can probably take it.
There's no coding for insurance for kratom use disorder. So they put opioid use disorder down for that. And if any spike that's happened, he's referring to 708, but refuses to differentiate it.
But the thing is, even during the height of OxyContin prescribing, and Jeffrey Singer puts out these statistics, and we made a short video about it, that even during the height of OxyContin prescribing, there was never a spike of opioid addiction. People moved to the available drug. And so they went from what they were taking and moved to OxyContin, but it remained relatively stable. The only year that there was any kind of weird spike was around 2013, where they changed the definition of opioid addiction to opioid use disorder, and then you can't compare it anymore. But he also said in the podcast, 5% of the country has opioid use disorder. He said this the other day. That's not true. The National Drug Survey, the NSDUH, which is where we get statistics in this country, the most recent one, they don't say anything near 5%. So he just continues to put out all of these lies, and it's so frustrating because no one calls him on it.
Yeah,
and
that's how it is. Yeah, nobody says anything. They take him for his word because of who he is.
Yeah. Did he say anything about being on their behalf of law firms or anything this time, Mac?
No, in fact, he denies it. He said that he is not acting on behalf of any litigant, that he's not involved in any kratom wrongful death cases, that he's not. That's not his game. He's only trying to educate policymakers about the dangers of kratom, and he's calling out this bad data set that we're claiming that the kratom is safe. He says no, it's not safe. It's highly addictive and it's deadly. I asked him to explain to me if he understood the difference between the raw leaf kratom materials and properly extracted, where you're not upsetting the ratios using FDA-approved food grade solvents, and 7-OH, which obviously is chemically manipulated. And he tried to tell me that 7-OH and kratom are the same, which is the narrative from 7-OH. And this is a tricky subject because there are people that are addicted to 7-OH now because of its chemical profile. It got on the market without there being any safety testing, which the 7H people admitted. There's no controls on the quality control because you cannot get an FDA registration for a lab or a manufacturing facility because they'll shut you down if you're producing 7OH because it has not cleared the safety threshold under the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. And then I told him, I said, here's the bottom line. It's dirty. There's no way that you can tell. Some manufacturers are using a process that is literally, as they've described it, as using pull shot chemicals. That's the cheapest way to do it, but it's also the dirtiest. You don't know what chemicals get thrown into it. You don't know what the residuals are. So you're putting these people at risk. And he's saying, oh, they're the same thing. I said, they are not the same thing. And you're suggesting that they are. And he did say that there are many people who are claiming they're showing up at clinics where he claims he's treating them, which was an interesting thing. He didn't answer when I said, are you really treating patients? And he wouldn't answer that question. But he said, my patients are showing up saying that 7OH is helping them with their pain. And I said, okay, it may be, but it ought to be a safely formulated, properly regulated product. That's all I'm saying. And if they ban it, that will force it into the new drug application process where it's where it can be properly evaluated. So he's obviously scouting for more contracts to do this kind of expert testimony. And he'll be subject to the same restrictions, I think, in the entities he currently opioids.
I mean, he might not be for wrongful death. Like I don't think he did a lot of wrongful death cases. He usually is hired on behalf of what turns into like mass tort multi-district litigation cases where he's an expert witness or a consultant. And I don't believe for a second that he has not spoken to law firms about it. Once Wendy Chamberlain started saying that Andrew Kolodny was helping them prepare and all of this, there's no way, I don't believe for one second, that he's not working with a lawyer or at least having spoken to a lawyer. And the 7OH and Kratom being the same is the same playbook. Just like he always says, Vicodin and heroin is the same. Like this is what he does. It's all part of that. He needs them to be merged together. You need a drug that, like a prescription pain medication that is safe when taken as prescribed usually, and then an illicit drug that is often not safe and contaminated and we don't know what's in it. And it's a very same dynamic, and he needs them merged and blurred to be in one category and for everyone to believe that, so that all of the deaths, all of the addiction, all of the harm can be blamed on Kratom. I mean, just like he did prescription opioids. It really, what you said, Mac, is it really is the same playbook. He makes me so upset. Oh, God.
Go ahead, Claudia.
My greatest fear is that 60 Minutes will give him a platform again.
Oh,
and he will, and if they do, he will wipe out the Kratom industry. Andrew Kolodny did not wake up and said, I'm going to take a trip to DC with my backpack on. Just to learn, just to have an in-depth conversation with Mac Haddow. This man is a monster. And I just hope, what you folks have that we didn't have as a community is you have, a team of lobbyists, and you have very active advocates, who can get out there, as opposed to the pain community. We had, as the Italians say, ugats, nobody. And we still have nobody. But as the founder of the DPF, and who's ever watching this man must be watched every step of the way, because he is a menace to medicine. He is a Bernie Madoff of medicine. He has amassed wealth like no other academic has, other than his colleagues at his, the doctors of prop. But they are single-handedly responsible for not only a growing suicide list in the pain community, but a spike in deadly overdoses. And nobody will, I started organizing protests outside his office. He is, in plain and in simple terms, he is a monster. And I just urge the Kratom advocates to continue doing what you're doing. And thank God that you have Mac, because like I said, we still have nobody. And, so many of our constituents have told us that Kratom has helped their pain. And actually, so many constituents have also told me that 7OH has helped their pain. But if they weren't ripped off of their, regulated full agonist opioids, they wouldn't have had to go to 7-OH. And we can take the 7-OH off the market, but guess what? There's already something taking its place, and we're going to take that off the market, and there's going to be something in that place, and it's going to be deadlier. So I just urge that Kratom advocates continue to continue to do what you're doing. But I just pray to dear God that 60 Minutes does not give this man a platform, because no media outlet is calling him out. He always fails to disclose certain things. And to see this Kratom hysteria play out in real time, I must text Bev like weekly. I said, I can't believe I'm watching this play out in real time. And to see this Suboxone for Kratom grift
Mm-hmm.
just
Yep.
on LinkedIn. And I
Mm-hmm.
tell people, I was like, oh my gosh, never ever let a doctor put you on the opioid to come off of Kratom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But to see all of them on LinkedIn, I saw some gentleman, Dean Francis, he blocked me on LinkedIn. And I said, you know what, Francis? I said, I turned off my brother's breathing machine. He died from kidney failure. Yet we didn't sue the makers of ibuprofen. I said, the grief stricken parent fatigue is so real. My goodness, all they do is weaponize their grief. And
And
it's
they,
just,
yeah. Yeah.
yeah, it's just a never ending thing.
It's never ending. And even now, like one of the mothers, Alexis Pluis, she's one of the big like harm reduction advocates. And she was just on a podcast 2 days ago, and she said illicit fentanyl deaths of today are still because of Purdue. I don't know how that's possible. She said that,
No.
it primed people into wanting opioids. And so it just became a generational thing. But the other thing that Kalani does that he understands, other people may not understand, and I want to explain, is how they come up with an abatement plan. So whether or not he's retained by lawyers right now, there is mass tort kratom in the works. There's websites, you can see them, Kratom Litigation Group and mass tort court cases. They have it listed. So we know that it's in the works. And the way that they come up with these abatement plans, at least for prescription opioids, was the number to a few of the things that would give more money to an area in the country was the number of OUD diagnoses and the number of deaths that could be blamed on opioids. And so I do think this is part of also why they're pushing kratom is an opioid. Kratom is an opioid. It's opioid use disorder, because now any death, they're trying to push it so it's a bigger abatement plan. So the kratom industry is responsible for it. And I don't think he cares about fact. I think he just is he's circular. It's like circular citation. He will never give evidence. Like Mac was explaining, he will just say other people have said it, but that is not evidence that someone
Right.
else said it.
And he'll just they just keep regurgitating it everywhere they can. And so that's the narrative people hear. And that's what they believe, even if it's no truth to it whatsoever.
Right.
Like
And the
the
industry
gas
funded.
station heroin, gas
Yeah.
station heroin.
Exactly.
And Bev always said, right now they are creating the harm. So
Yes.
God forbid this does turn into litigation. These jurors are going in. Oh, I heard about the gas station heroin.
Yeah,
Just like
exactly.
just like people say to us, oh, have you seen Dope Sick? Right. So people are getting their science
Yep.
from Dope Sick, the fictional series, and now they're getting the science from mainstream media. And once again, mainstream media outlets didn't wake up and decide, oh, let's just talk about kratom. If you can see
Right.
systematically, thousands, all of these television stations. Now, Rhode Island has reversed the ban on kratom. I got to tell you, I'm still, I
Shocked.
worry about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we're so fortunate, but you can still see like certain lawmakers. Mac, you've seen Michelle McGaw, right? Just despises kratom. That woman loves the opioid Suboxone as a pharmacist, and
Yeah.
it's just this cult-like. It's like a cult, the
Yeah.
Suboxone cult. But
Yes.
if you're a doctor who happens to see this, you should be jailed for putting a patient on the opioid Suboxone to come off of kratom in its pure form, because
Yeah.
quite frankly, I don't know anybody who died after using kratom. I learned about kratom probably 10
Right.
years ago. I was doing a photo shoot for a fitness competition, and the photographer had Crohn's disease. He's like, oh yeah, I don't take pain medication, I manage it with kratom. And that was the first I heard of that, and all of a sudden it's gas station heroin.
Yeah. And one thing about Mastor is there's this what's called like third party investing. And so when they have a case that they think is going to be huge, like opioids, they have lawyers that will invest and they're betting on it doing well. And if it doesn't do well as a lawsuit, they lose their money. If it does well, then they all make a lot of money. And that is the funding that's used for things like Hulu documentaries and books and billboards. And I think it's also funding trying to get it banned across the country, because look what happened when they basically eliminated prescription opioids all at once. A lot of people died because you had people. So it wasn't necessarily the prescription opioid that they were dying from, it was the stopping of it, but they still were able to blame all those deaths on it. And I think that's part of what's happening. I wouldn't be surprised if there's third party financing for kratom lawsuits going to pushing these bans. And I think what they want is for everyone to be cut off, hoping that they go to 7OH or that they go somewhere else and they die, because then they could blame that on the kratom and it jacks up the abatement plan again. Like, I think
Yeah.
it's just, it's sociopathic. They don't, this is not about safety. This is not about concern for addiction.
No.
This is about money, pure and simple.
Well, and I think if it cannot be underestimated that the exposure that you have created to Andrew Kolodny, both Bev and Claudia, and the work they've done is going to save lives down the road with the kratom world, because right now it is his objective to replicate exactly what he did with opioids and try to demonize kratom in the same way. And we would have been unprepared for it, but for the work that you've done.
Yes.
We're grateful for it. Exposing this man for what he is. He is peddling his services to government agencies around the country and at the federal level. He told me he was pitching people to be able to explain what kratom's real dangers were, and that was what led a little bit to the discussion I had with him actually earlier down in Florida, when he was pitching the virtues of Suboxone. Now, he denied that he has any relationship to the Suboxone manufacturer, that he doesn't really do anything for them.
That's probably true, Mac, because
But he did.
he's
But he
made
did.
right many years ago when he was peddling it to the prisons. Paying. I mean, I think that wasn't he offering to pay people $10,000?
Yeah, that those articles about like the dark side of addiction treatment or something in the early 2000s, he admitted in those articles he was working for the department, not the Department of Health, but whatever it was called up in New York, mental health and hygiene, and he was crossing his words, like crossing the boroughs of New York City, acting like a salesman for Suboxone and paying people $10,000 to prescribe it. Now, he doesn't say in those articles where that money came from, but the other part, he worked for Phoenix House, who were big prescribers of Suboxone, and Phoenix House was the first fiscal sponsor of PROP. So PROP's not a nonprofit. It is an organization that has a fiscal sponsor. And the first one was Phoenix House. Did Phoenix House take funding from Indivior? Probably. I mean, we don't know. There's no way to know. We don't know what his funding was for PROP that he created in 2010 with them as their fiscal sponsor. And then when he cut ties with them, it went under Fed Up. Rally, Rumler Hope is his fiscal sponsor now, and they take money from drug testing labs and things like that. And so, he's heavily funded. PROP is heavily funded. As long as he's under there as a fiscal sponsor, he's going to be heavily funded by addiction treatment industry, whether it's treatment centers or labs or anything like that. But we don't get to know what he's funded by. I believe he's not taking money from Suboxone right now. I think, people have accused him of having like stock in it, whatever. Like I've never seen evidence of that. I don't know if that's true. I wouldn't be surprised. I am positive that this man has benefited in a roundabout way from increased sales of Suboxone, whether that's when he was at Phoenix House or however it is.
So
Because
he's indirectly
you can't trace
getting
the
it.
money.
The money has been cleaned so many times that it is just impossible to trace the money to these people. But it really is a racket. Let's talk about Shatterproof briefly. So the founder of Shatterproof, once again, another grief-stricken papa, right? Lost his kid. I think his kid died by suicide, but blamed it on pills. Shatterproof is a massive organization. they are funded by the makers of Suboxone. They receive money from Indivior. So they receive money from an opioid maker, but of course nobody cares about addiction organizations who are funded by opioid makers. Only, God forbid we ever took one penny from
Yeah.
any opioid maker. But I've seen Shatterproof create their own kratom epidemic.
They're
I
talking
just can't.
about it now. They're talking about
Yes.
it, and
Yeah.
so is Caleb Alexander. And
Yes.
it goes beyond that with Shatterproof because Tom McClellan sat on the board of Shatterproof for I think a decade, and he also sat on the board. He was a non-executive director for Indivior, making and having shares in it. Probably made over $1 million during that time, and they took funding from makers of Narcan and like Claudia said, the makers of Suboxone. And Kolodny was also on that advisory board for a while. He's on the board of Fed Up and has been of Rumler House in the past. So he's heavily if he sits on the board of an organization or has sat on the board of an organization in any role that takes their funding from Indivior, then how can he say, even if he's not taking money from them, how can he say he doesn't benefit? The whole
Right.
organization benefits,
Yeah.
and so he's right. Like, I can't trace it directly, but like you said, it's like they've cleaned them. It's like policy laundering. That's the only way I know how to call it, because
Wow.
it goes from Indivior will go to Shatterproof, and then Shatterproof lobbies for things like like lowered prescribing, and so that lowered prescribing then they push for Suboxone to be given, and so then in turn that puts money back in their pocket, and you could trace it. It's like SAMHSA to like HHS, and then HHS to the states, and then the states into these organizations that push Suboxone, and you cannot trace it completely, and you will never know where it came from.
And the next thing you know, you see buses drive by and Matt saves lives, right? So that money has trickled down into the states, into these initiatives. I don't care what anybody says. The war on kratom is about Suboxone.
Hmm.
Get them hooked hard. And I think the Suboxone dental lawsuits, because people are seeing all of those Sublocade advertisements,
I
I
see him on
can't.
TV too.
Oh yeah, and that's just because the Suboxone lawsuits will probably bankrupt that part of Indivior. So I think what they're doing right now is that damage control, right?
Hmm.
Let's get these folks on kratom. Let's encourage them to get an injection. They're just so sick and twisted. I've never seen anything like this on my life. The war on kratom is not about saving lives. The war on kratom is about getting more people. There was a generation hooked on the opioid
Yeah,
buprenorphine. A
yeah,
generation. They're not
Yeah.
coming
absolutely.
off of it.
No, and they
Oh,
want everyone on it. It is the same. It's about that, and it's about litigation, and nothing else seems to matter. And I do want people to understand that opioid use disorder is a diagnosis from the DSM, the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, the DSM-5, where they created these criteria for opioid use disorder, and in that there is a built-in safety that if you are under the care of a physician, so if you are taking Vicodin or even Suboxone under the care of a physician, then two of the criteria cannot be used against you to diagnose you, which is withdrawal and tolerance, right? Because everyone who takes it every day is going to have those things. And so it's a built-in safety. And all you need is two criteria to have a diagnosis of opioid use disorder. And so it's built in there, or else every single patient on opioids daily would be diagnosed with opioid use disorder. Well, I do believe that they're taking that and manipulating it because people don't understand. You hear him say and them say easily, kratom use disorder, kratom use disorder. Everyone who takes it daily has kratom use disorder. Well, the reason he can say that is because kratom doesn't come from a doctor. So you can't have that same exclusion in there. So anyone who takes kratom daily that has any kind of tolerance or even a teeny tiny bit of withdrawal if they stopped it would be diagnosed with kratom use disorder. And I think he's taking advantage that most people don't understand that. And then he makes it look like there's this huge explosion in kratom use disorder, which he in turn calls opioid use disorder. And it's all a sleight of hand. All of it is. None of it's real. It's manufactured. It's a made up crisis completely, but they're going to create an actual crisis if they ban this everywhere.
And many
Just
people
like,
are going to bank from it.
Hmm.
Yeah.
well, and I think
yeah, people will profit off of,
People
more
suffering.
suffering. But I just hope that there's more honest doctors who will come forward, perhaps they're kratom consumers. I just pray that there's more honest people than
Yeah.
we had nothing but dishonest people throughout our crisis, and we're still in crisis. I just hope that there's more ethical people that are willing to come forward and say, stop. This is not a kratom. We don't have a kratom crisis. Would I like to see 7-OH regulated? Absolutely. Would I like to see pain patients get on their pain medication instead of 7-O? Absolutely. But just to see the amount of dishonest addiction doctors, because I personally believe addiction medicine is a cult,
Yeah.
and to see them on TikTok talking, yeah, so you're desperate to come off kratom. I said, who is desperate to come off kratom? You folks are creating crises to satisfy your love for the opioid Suboxone. So we've got to hope that, Mac, I just hope that you continue to find more honest people to get involved, to come forward on behalf of kratom consumers, so they don't lose access to this plant.
Well, it appears to me that the importance of Kolodny claiming that kratom is an opioid is so that he can justify the treatment option being Suboxone.
Yeah.
Because I challenged him directly. I said, you are actually advocating for people that suffer from what you call kratom use disorder, and you call kratom an opioid, and you're using Suboxone? I said, that's insane. And you go, oh no, that's how you have to treat opioid addictions. I said, I get it. And so that's how you're justifying it. And then on top of that, he's claiming that naloxone can be an effective tool in a kratom overdose. I said, naloxone doesn't touch metrogeny. Doesn't touch it because it goes to a different sector of the brain. Doesn't go to the brain where you have respiratory suppression. So you're wasting your naloxone, and more importantly, you're addicting people with Suboxone, which is an opioid, which obviously is going to be a big problem. And he said, it's not an opioid. Suboxone's not an opioid. And I mean, he goes around.
He said that? Oh my gosh.
So, and I think maybe it was in the context of being
a full agonist
opioid treatment, but
yeah,
this is to me, at least it appears that, and in my opinion, he is now trying to develop another cash flow stream for himself, and he's trying to justify a marketplace where he's either advocating for them for profit, or that's part of his money laundering scheme or whatever it is, in order to justify his pitching to these. He may not be receiving money directly from Suboxone, who knows, but he is getting money from these agencies that are contracting with him to buy his consulting services, all of which benefit from him calling kratom an opioid, all of which benefit from recommending Suboxone as the treatment methodology for people that are showing up in clinics without asking the fundamental question: is this kratom natural, or is this 7-OH? That's a critical question that they need to ask. And I think people are starting to wake up to it, not yet there in the levels they need to be. You look at what the Poison Control Center data that he frequently uses. I said it wasn't until last year that at the national level, the Poison Control Centers now have a designation where they ask, is this 7-OH or natural kratom? The state level people haven't caught up with it yet. So all of the data, this data dump that he likes to use, isn't properly categorized. In terms of his wanting to call natural and 7-OH the same is his manufactured justification, not the scientific reality. And even the 7-OH people are coming to admit that, in terms of how it's manufactured, you're taking a trace amount of 7-OH in natural kratom leaf products, and you are chemically manipulating it to create a product that's majority 7-OH. Some of it horribly so. And then Claudia pointed out correctly, then the next iteration is pseudodoxil, which is a next step off of 7-OH. And then you have 8-OH, 10-OH, and 12-OH, which are new derivatives that they're using to get around the limitations placed by the governments. And then they have totally off the wall MGM 15 and 16 products that don't have the required genetic link in order to be tied to as an analog to 7-OH. So that's completely out there, whack-a-mole for regulators. And they're going to have to continue fighting that, because these chemists are very creative, but the ultimate losers are consumers.
Who's making those? Is it in this country? Is it out of this country? Who's making all of that?
Most of it is happening right here in the United States, although I can tell you that I was in Thailand, invited to go to a conference there. And in Southeast Asia, government officials like to have photo ops and then they disappear. I mean, they beat it out of the room. But in Thailand, the Minister of Justice asked to meet with me, and he had a group of his ministers with him, and they explained that they had identified 4 factories that were making 7-OH products for distribution globally. And I said, are you able to trace any of that to the United States? And they said, well, no, actually it's going to China. And then we suspect it's going to the United States.
Wow.
So I think there's truth to that. But the majority of 7-OH today in the country, I believe, is being manufactured in Florida, in California, Colorado, and some in South Carolina. And they're white labeling these operations to produce hundreds of products that are just labeled whatever they want to label them in order to attract people. And I hear people all the time say, oh, well, we should get rid of these products that are being manufactured that are attractive to children. You look at the packaging for these 7-OH products, it's horrific. Yeah. And Smurfs, you get wildly colored watermelon flavored, and then they have all this really attractive for teenagers kind of packaging. It's terrible. And yet they're the same people funding these 7-OH advocacy groups that the advocacy groups are saying we shouldn't have those. And here's the kicker. There's an advocate by the name of Michelle Ross who sat and told the California legislature that they no longer are making sublingual or chewable products that bypass your gut, go directly to your bloodstream, and hit you like a freight train. She said, we're not doing those anymore. It took me a day and a half to get home. I ordered a dozen products from the groups that are funding her group that are selling sublingual tablets and chewable tablets. I mean, they'll say anything to get by the question and not tell the truth about what's really happening in this marketplace. So this needs to be cleaned up. And Claudia is just the part of the cancer. That's because he's spewing a whole different narrative that is all designed to do one thing, and that is to promote the interest in the agenda that he has, which has already been well documented in the opioid crisis, what he did and how he actually created a crisis. And now he wants to do it here in the kratom industry as well.
And I love how he says, a lot of them will say, these people who are against kratom, they'll say, well, because people will say to them, well, people are taking it to treat pain or anxiety. And they'll say, well, they shouldn't take that. They should go to their doctor and get an FDA approved medication, as if you can in 2026.
Exactly.
Like, you just literally spent the last 15 years making sure nobody could. And now you're like, oh, well, they should get it from their doctor. You know they can't. The only thing people can get is Suboxone, and you could make a phone call and have it delivered to your house in probably 2 hours. And, unending, no drug tests, no pill or film counts or whatever. This is why I'm calling, he's going to call them heroin pills. He's going to call kratom gas station heroin. I'm going to start calling Suboxone heroin films.
He tried.
Why not?
Make a point. I mean, I raised the issue with him, and we discussed it during our congressional briefing, that the NIH announcement that they were going to proceed with an investigational new drug for purified kratom that as a treatment for opioid use disorder. So they really are serious from the NIH standpoint about trying to do this. Now, that's important. It's going to take them 2 to 3 years, and then they will open it for a new drug application, which will require a corporate sponsor to step in, and that's another 5 to 10 year process. But the most significant thing about that particular announcement is that in order to do so, they had to have cleared an institutional review board, an independent IRB evaluation on the safety of the product that they were going to test in human subjects. And they had to prove there was a reasonable basis for safety. So how in the world can Kolodny's narrative and theory about the dangers of kratom killing people not have been evaluated by that IRB? Of course it was. And the IRB concluded that all of this, God love these people that are really suffering from the pain of losing a loved one. Doesn't mean they're right. It doesn't mean that the medical examiners and coroners they rely upon were right, because we know they're not. And it doesn't mean the Kolodnys of the world that are fueling this anti-kratom narrative are right, because they're not. The bottom line here is that an IRB looked at the data that was available, which includes every single death, every single one over the last 10 years, and they determined there's not an unreasonable risk to safety of patients taking purified metrogene, which is a higher concentration and strength of a product, and that is as conclusive as you're going to get until they complete their study. So to me, this, and I said this to Claudia, and he said, well, I have no idea what you're talking about. Of course not. The bottom line is, an IRB is an independent group that's designed to protect human patients. You can kill rats in studies. I get it that the PETA people don't like that, but we've accepted the risk associated with animal testing. You don't test humans in the same way. You don't experiment on reasonable risks. And if you believe Claudia, every person who ingests a kratom product is at risk for death. And it's just not true. It is.
And that's the whole thing. Like, he wants everyone to be seen as at risk of, like, anyone who takes kratom or a prescription opioid. He wants that they're all at risk, like this huge risk of addiction. And the fact of the matter is, people do get addicted to prescription opioids, but it's a very, very small amount, percentage wise. And he needs everyone to believe that exposure to a substance causes addiction, and that is just not the facts. But it's important for him to do that. And I don't even understand. Physicians for Responsible Opioid Prescribing, that's the name of his organization. Now, this organization, I believe every single one of them has been an expert witness in litigation, every one of them. And I think he loves to call, like, our organization an AstroTurf organization or other pain organizations, meaning that we're not really here to fight what we say we are. We're here to do like opioid lobby bidding or whatever. But his organization is AstroTurf. Their whole goal was always litigation and expert witnesses. So it was for responsible opioid prescribing. You don't hear him fighting other aspects of the drug war. You don't hear him talking about, methamphetamine or any other aspect of addiction. It's prescription opioids. So how do you fit kratom into that? No one's prescribing it. So why would you all of a sudden just fight about kratom? You don't hear him talk about, like, xylazine or other drugs. So why such an interest? Well, in my opinion, that's because of the upcoming idea of litigation, which is his exact reason of that organization. This is why he set up Fed Up the parents. That was his idea, because they're a moral shield. That's exactly what you said. Like, you're not allowed to question them because they're grieving parents. And I think he knows that. They bully people, and it shuts down conversation.
We get called the bully for even questioning.
Right. And they're the ones that are, dictating laws. I mean, they're coming in and telling their stories. And I mean, I'm sure some of them believe it, whatever, but it's like the legislation, the lawmakers, the city council, none of them look any further into the facts or the science or the thousands of people that have sent their testimonies in. It's automatically just, it's over.
Yeah.
Well, and Claudia was appalled at the presentation made at the congressional briefing by Dr. Heidi Sikora, looking at and evaluating the methods by which these autopsies and tox screens were evaluated. And he just generalized it and said, these are families that have concluded from medical professionals that kratom is dangerous. And I said, those medical professionals are making mistakes. And Heidi pointed out. And he said, well, I didn't understand any of that presentation. I said, it's because you didn't want to, because here you saw example after example. And just as one illustration, one of the premier advocates who is claiming that their child died of kratom is Patty Wheeler. And Patty Wheeler shopping her story to 60 Minutes. Now, 60 Minutes probably won't exist in 2 months. I don't know. But she's going to continue shopping that story to other national news outlets. And Patty Wheeler's son, which we now have a copy of the autopsy report, apparently had an overdose of cocaine and fentanyl in his past, prior to his passing. So he obviously had struggled with addiction problems with very dangerous chemicals. When he died, it was called, by Patty Wheeler's description, a kratom death, which is why she's going around the country with Dean Francis and some other people that have similar grievances. Or grieving parents, and they're calling these kratom deaths. In his autopsy report, there were a number of medications that he was on, and they mentioned that he tested positive for metrogene, but it was non-quantifiable. In other words, it was so low they couldn't even test what the levels were, and they want to call that a kratom death.
Mhm.
But that's
Worse.
this just shows you how this hysteria has gone so far. I'm not dismissing the grief of a parent, and I'm not dismissing the fact that they feel badly about their kids who have passed away, or a spouse or a loved one. But it ought to be based on the facts. And actually, Heidi went through several of them and consistently showed that there wasn't sufficient data in order to do this. And one of the foremost advocates in the Kratom Danger Awareness Group, who has consistently told people, do not show your autopsies or your tox screens. Don't show them because they'll misinterpret them. And this particular woman has been a strong advocate for this particular Kratom Danger Awareness Group. Her son's autopsy report, however it was done, was included in the public record in Pocatello, out in Idaho, one of the cities in Idaho that just banned kratom, and her son's autopsy report's in there. We've never been able to find it because it's not public information. Somebody inserted it into the record, and when you look at that autopsy report, this kid was taking metrocin, kratom. There's no question about it, but there were anomalies in that, significant anomalies. This kid died of a seizure. He stood up from a poker game he had with his friends, had a seizure, and died. Well, when you look at the autopsy report, there is a much more reasonable expectation for the levels that he had of certain chemicals in your blood that maintain your living. He was below it, and the coroner didn't even look at it.
Oh, I know who you're talking
Of course
about.
not. Of course not. I mean, the thing is it is what they did with OxyContin. I'm not saying there are not anyone who died, that nobody died from OxyContin, but if you look at the facts, they even did say this part in Dope Sick, which is a fictional series, but very few people died from oxycodone alone. Very, very few people. Almost everyone who died had multiple other drugs. They had to hire somebody to do these talks, to like analyze it and say, even if they had heroin and cocaine and methamphetamine and oxycodone, they hired people to say, that looked at it and said, they concluded, oh, well, even if it was just this amount of oxycodone, they would have died anyway. And that's what they did for OxyContin. That's how they were able to do that. But it's fascinating because there's a lot of people who are on Suboxone, a lot of people who take it for a few days until they can get their next drug of choice, and then they'll take their drug, and then they'll take Suboxone here and there. So I'm positive that there's a lot of people who die from a polydrug overdose that
Yeah.
have Suboxone in their system also. So should we just conclude that they all died from Suboxone? Like, they don't want to apply the same rules to them, and it drives me
Right.
crazy.
Did you guys watch Mac's presentation, his prop of using milk in Everclear?
I didn't see all of it yet. I have it saved to watch.
He's like, you don't call this a milk death.
Well, what I did was the average beverage of choice in America today is a 20-ounce beverage, whether it's a can of soda or whatever. And so I took a 20-ounce container and I put 1 ounce of milk in it, and I put 19 ounces of 151 proof grain alcohol Everclear, and 20 ounces. And I invited people to come and drink it. I said, now, if you drink this, you are going to have a seizure and you probably will die. And when we get to the end of that, are we going to call this a milk death?
That's exactly. I mean, that's right. You can't state that. Like, I mean, so if someone is shot in the head and they took kratom that morning, then it's a kratom death. That's what it goes down as. But it's the same as prescription opioids. If someone
There's
has
actually one.
There is
A
one.
person got shot in the chest with a shotgun.
So no, that particular report was published by the FDA as one of 33 deaths that were recorded in the Federal Register when they did their 2016 recommendation for scheduling. And so we FOIA'd all of the death reports. The one that we could not get, the one that was excluded based on HIPAA, actually involved a kid that was involved in a drug transaction. It was a sting operation. When the police surrounded the car, they ordered them out of the car. The informant jumped out of the car quickly. The kid that was selling, what turns out it was weed that he was selling, reached into his coat pocket. The police thought he was reaching for a weapon, so they shot him. He died of 2 gunshot wounds to the chest.
Yep.
He tested positive for kratom in his bloodstream. They called that a kratom death.
I'm not
He died of
surprised.
2 gunshot wounds to the
I'm
chest.
not surprised.
I mean, after COVID, like I remember when
Mm.
COVID was going on, people were dying of random things and they would test
Mhm.
them for COVID and it was automatically,
Yeah.
a COVID death. So it's like
Yeah.
I can't understand how so many people still put so much faith into the whole
Yeah.
I'm guessing for like especially the COVID thing, like people getting in car accidents and then they died from, got tested for COVID and it was listed as a COVID death. I'm guessing it's like the federal funding stuff,
Yeah.
just like what we're
Yeah.
seeing going on right now with
Yeah.
kratom.
You are
When-
not going to get reimbursed at a drug rehabilitation clinic if you come in and treat a patient for what they call kratom use disorder, if you treat them appropriately, which is to let them self-detox from kratom over a 10-day period as described by Nora Volkow. You don't
Yeah.
get reimbursed for that. What
Right.
you do get reimbursed for is putting them on Suboxone or 2 of the other
Forever.
drugs that the FDA has approved for that purpose. Then you keep them there for an extended period of time, treat them for up to a year. You get reimbursed for that, but you don't get
Yeah.
reimbursed if you just call it for what it is. And so there is an underlying corrupt incentive for there to be treatment methodologies employed
Yeah.
by these substance abuse clinics. And you hear them all the time. Oh, we're seeing this huge spike in these kratom overdose. That's we're seeing a spike in their profits too. And someone needs to look behind that to say, A, are these truly natural kratom leaf, people that are claiming to be addicted to it? And two, and they can be dependent, obviously. Or two, is this a 7-OH patient? We don't know. So there needs to be certainly a more extensive look into the background on these cases.
Yeah, I mean, in Divier, well, back when they were Reckitt, before they split off, when they were Reckitt Benckiser, we have one of their presentations, like 2011, I think, where they called chronic pain patients on daily opioids their untapped market. They literally, we were part of their business plan. And so if you think about it, like they knew, like if you cut everyone off of prescription opioids, some will go to Suboxone, some will, and that's what they wanted. But Kratom, I think, put a wrench in that plan because a lot instead started taking Kratom, and
Well-
I think that we're their untapped market. Well, they didn't get all of that market anymore when those patients were cut off, and I think that's they're upset. And
When I got cut off,
Yeah.
I started doing cocaine.
Yeah.
And I was just about to start shooting up heroin before I watched A Leaf of Faith and bought kratom at the smoke shop the next day.
Architect were the artificial controls that were placed by the government on prescription of opioid medications to treat pain patients other than Andrew Kolodny.
Yeah.
I mean, he contributed to drying up of all of these, right now the opioid death cases are reduced because of what Kolodny did, and his cash cow's gone. And so now he can't be testifying in these cases. He can't be advising the governments, local governments. Kratom is his problem. And so he's trying to weaponize and monetize it. And it's just unfair. And it's my opinion that he's the biggest threat to the kratom community today.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Given what he's doing. And
Absolutely agree.
and we're ready to meet him toe for toe, and we'll fight this out because he doesn't have the science behind him. He has his speculation, and he has poorly developed theories that really need to stand the test. He can't sit in front of a judge today and say, oh, well, this is the way it is, because we'll be challenging him every minute of that.
Good. See, that what Claudia said is right. You have what we didn't have. Like at the time, we had no power, we had no lobby, because they cut off the opioid lobby. He made sure of that because they did all these, part of what they did before the lawsuits was they opened investigations into pharmaceutical companies and their ties to pain organizations. And so anyone that took any money, like they lost all credibility, and really they eliminated the opioid lobby. But thank God there still is a kratom lobby. So they eliminated the opioid lobby. There was no one to help fight and no one to call him on his lies. And anyone who tried, it was just, oh, they're industry funded. They're industry funded. And I see them doing the same with you guys. Like anyone who stands up to talk about it, if they do have You know, they could be someone who has struggled with addiction, and they used kratom and they got off of it, and they opened a business where they sell kratom, and of course they'll talk about their lives being saved. Well, Kalani will, well, they're only saying that because they're industry
Yep.
funded. They're the kratom industry. Of course they're doing it, but he's not an industry. Like, of course he's an industry. He's so heavily tied to the addiction industry, and it's one of the most unregulated industries there is. These treatment centers, and
Yeah.
it. Yeah, you're right. He is the number one. He is. He's the biggest threat to kratom today.
And but for you and Claudia, Bev, we wouldn't have been prepared to have this battle and approach it correctly. And so thank you, because without this information on Dr. Kolodny and what he's doing and the way he's misrepresenting, mischaracterizing, and misleading people, we needed to know that. We thank God we do, and it's because of yours and Claudia's efforts.
Wow.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for
Claudia
saying
had to
that.
jump off. Sorry, she had to jump
Yes.
off to say goodbye to her daughter. So she wants to say
Okay.
thank you.
Oh,
For
yeah.
yeah.
I'm glad she was able to come on. I appreciate it. And yeah, Bev, that whole breakdown that you've done, I can't imagine how much time it took. But for you just to
Thank you.
connect all those dots and everything, I was telling Missy, you're like a human computer or something.
Oh my God. Thank you. I just became really obsessed with figuring it out because I didn't understand when I entered this in 2017. Why is this happening? Like, I know these things aren't true, what they're saying. So, like, what happened? What was their reason? And so, Carrie Judy, who is I call her my researcher partner in crime. Like, we have researched together for years and just like obsessively, probably not so healthy, but obsessively listened to everything I can to try to understand it. It's just so confusing how this can continue to happen. And then
Yeah.
also, how is he so allowed? How are expert witnesses in litigation and those who create the abatement plans, like there's a guy, Caleb Alexander, how are they allowed to influence drug policy so heavily? Like, it seems like that shouldn't even be allowed. Like, they say Mac is industry funded, he shouldn't influence it. But what about them? Like, they've made millions upon millions of dollars doing this. So how is that even allowed to influence drug policy like that? It's not
Do you
just
know
them. Like,
Mac?
yeah, how?
Because they walk into the room and they bring in all of their credentials, and they have so hidden the funding sources that they have in order to be there, and they act like we are this non-interested party, then we're scientists and therefore we're telling the truth. But if anyone contradicts them, they point the bony finger of blame at them and say, oh, well, they're industry funded, or they're that.
Exactly.
I mean, for him, for Kolodny to have criticized Jack Henningfield as not being a credible witness, and he wants to act like he somehow has a stage that's elevated beyond the expertise. The fact of the matter is, and very little of kratom science has been funded by industry, very little. The vast majority, by magnitudes, has been funded by the National Institutes on Drug Abuse. Over 100, now well over 120 million, I think
Yeah.
it is. And this
That's important. That's an important fact
yeah,
right
yeah.
there, because he will claim the opposite and just say everything is funded by industry, and that's their whole motivation. So that's actually really, really important what you just said. I didn't know that. So most of the kratom studies were not funded by kratom industry.
No,
No.
I didn't know that.
I did a tabulation of what I know to be published studies that were funded by the industry, and it is well under $10 million.
I wouldn't be surprised if he started digging into the scientists. I'm sure he's going to see anyone who supports kratom. He's probably going to dig into them to see if they ever took any money from any industry. I'm sure it would be, it might be worthwhile for all of these doctors and people who are coming forward against kratom to actually dig into all of them, do some research
Yeah.
into each one of them, because like when the CDC guidelines came out in 2016, there were a lot, I mean, like thousands of doctors who came forward and said, these are going to harm people. People are going to die from this. And what Andrew Kolodny and another doctor, Caleb Alexander, who's also an expert witness, what they did is Johns Hopkins opened a study with them. Johns Hopkins funded it. Did a study on every single person who was speaking out against the guidelines or warning about them to see any of them took any money. Like that's what his study was, because his goal was to discredit anyone who
Yeah.
spoke out against it. Yet everyone who took money from lawyers, like no one cares about that. No one cared about the other side because it was a narrative that they said often. It became propaganda. They fed it to media. They fed it to 60 Minutes, and people still believe it now. You hear them talking about Purdue and the Sacklers all the time now, saying, "Oh well, they funded it." And he was
Yeah.
on a podcast the other day saying, "Oh well, the Sacklers became a scapegoat, but it really wasn't just about them. They just became the scapegoat." And I'm like, you literally it was
Yeah.
you who did it. And
Right.
then when he was the expert witness against Johnson and Johnson, if you look at his testimony, he said, well, they were the reason for the opioid crisis, and now it's Kratom is the reason for the opioid crisis.
Mhm.
Like, you know, it's
Well, a lot of
always,
the people
yeah.
that testify, I know Jack Henningfield, for example, like he will disclose that information
Mhm.
before he testifies at
Yeah.
hearings, but you never hear, and they still point the finger. They still say, the same thing. And you don't ever hear that from their side. You
No,
don't
they
ever hear
don't.
about the lawsuits that some of these
Mm-mm.
grieving families have before they testify. You don't hear about any conflict of interest. It's
Nope.
always,
The grieving families never say that. They never say,
No.
I am or will be involved in
No.
lawsuit. And yes, the KDA wants to say that they never got the $1 million of seed money from an anti-kratom child attorney. But I have the email from it.
That's
Whether
where
or
then the proof
not-
is on them. Then they
Exactly.
should show you their funding.
Exactly.
Mhm.
And then Wendy says that she said that she's offered bank records to who?
Yeah.
Is
No,
there
show
another?
them. Post them. Just
Show
post
me.
them.
Show
Where's
me.
your
I
financial
missed that email.
transparency?
I missed that email because I'm not.
Yeah.
Yeah, because is there another Misty Brown in the
Did you
creative
check your
community?
spam, guys? Did y'all check your spam?
She
Yeah.
put us on. She had Claudia quotes from Claudia. She took it off her website, but there were quotes from Claudia and you, Misty, from social media on her website that you guys are so. Do you remember that? Those.
Oh
quotes?
yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, like you're so awful. Why can't she should be transparent? We're transparent. We have our we
Yeah.
have our finances, and she should put hers. Like, who funds your organization? Is it a lawyer? If it's not a lawyer, then who is doing it?
Right.
I don't
Like
see. I
did
haven't.
did they initially start as a grassroots movement, and then the freaking parasites in the lawyer world bombarded them and offered them all these different. Oh, we can get you millions of dollars.
Hey, I have a question about something she said on that radio show the other day. She said that Kratom is always listed as not for human consumption, but I've never even seen that. So what is she talking about? Do you know?
So initially, the FDA issued an import alert, which said that kratom was not allowed for importation into the United States as something for human consumption.
Okay.
So early on, a group of creative exporters decided to put on their exports into the United States. This is raw material, not for human consumption.
Okay.
So that's where all this comes from. Now, the recipients of that material that then manufactured it into some finished products, some of them made the mistake early on of saying right on their bottles, not for human consumption. And that's all to get around this FDA law. We, from day one, told these manufacturers that's a mistake. We told the importers that's a mistake. And you see it today crop up. Anybody that's putting on their products not for human consumption is doing it defensively in order to ward off lawsuits. It's still bad policy in my opinion, but that's the derivation of it. And they're making a big deal of it today when the vast majority of products do not have that kind of labeling. I'm not familiar with any of the Indonesian or Thai government or Thai resources for plant material that are doing it anymore, but it was done early on.
So she was given it as a talking point from somebody at some point. And then when she was asked, like the host was like, well, that doesn't make any sense. And what is it for? You could tell you heard it, right, Misty? Like she didn't know how to answer it.
Yeah.
Like you can tell she didn't know what to say, but that makes sense. The way she said it, it made it sound like it all says that now, but I've never.
No.
That makes sense, Mac. Okay.
Well, I remember when out here in Denver, when kratom was supposed to be, it was banned in the county of Denver, but that they were still allowed to sell it, as long as it was saying not for human consumption on there.
Oh,
So
interesting.
I remember that.
And again, a bad policy to get around what that restriction was in some localities. There's a rule in the state of Ohio today, but that's by the Department of Public Health, that says that you cannot sell a kratom product in the state of Ohio unless it's in a clear plastic bag with no labeling instructions. That's the definition of insanity.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yes, and yet they justify it and say, well, we don't think that kratom should be involved in human consumption. So if you label it and say here's a serving size, that means you intend it for human consumption.
And the people in KDA were
They're mad that
celebrating that law being passed, and it's like, why would you celebrate that?
they got mad, or when sometimes when they testify, they get mad that, oh well, my so and so didn't know how much to take.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my God. And so I'm probably going to be hated for saying this because it's kind of a controversial statement, but when they blame a substance like Purdue Pharmaceutical or Kratom, when people blame that, it takes all personal responsibility away. And I think that's not a healthy thing to do. I think that I'm not saying treat people horribly when they're addicted, but to take all personal responsibility away as though like they're robots and they don't have a choice in any of it is not really healthy. And, I feel as though, you ever hear these mothers of the kratom people say, oh, my kid was told that it was natural and safe, and so they took it. Well, why didn't they look it up? Number one. And number two, what's their history? Do they have a history of addiction? And if so, why is it not on them that they took a product that they didn't research? Like,
exactly.
And they'll never disclose if they struggled with addiction before that. I don't know.
Because if you ask a question, you get called a bully.
Right,
Yeah,
because how dare you question a grieving parent? It's a moral shield. It's ridiculous.
And that's why I think, these kratom deaths, it sets us back so much because, a lot of these people could have had pre-existing conditions. There needs to be, instead of, oh, they found it on the scene, it's automatically a kratom death, or somebody told them that they took kratom, so they test them for it. And that's all the testing. That's all that's done. They just kind of leave it at that. And it's like, first of all, that person was an adult. They they went to the store, drove to the store, paid their own working money, and decided to take that. And
that's what the host was asking. The host was saying to her, well, if it said that on the thing that he took, your son took, that it's not for human consumption, why do you take it? And she was like, oh, I don't know, I wasn't aware of that until after he died. But that doesn't even make any sense either. Like, what do you mean? Why didn't you, if you were so concerned, because she's saying now that his whole personality changed. Well, why didn't you look into it then before? Like, see,
and then she took it herself.
You always hear them add stuff, right? As time goes on, that they never said before. Like,
I've never heard her herself. After her son died, she took it herself. I don't know if she took it. Yep, I don't know if she took it hoping that it would overdose and kill her, or I don't know.
Yeah, you can tell when they've been kind of coached what to say too.
This is a critically important factor that Bev's brought up. If you have a product that you purchase and you look at what the recommended serving sizes are, if you abuse it, if you take too much, then that's on you. And the duty to warn by a manufacturer is satisfied by disclosing what the appropriate serving sizes are and what the amount to be consumed in a 24-hour period are. And if you violate that, that's a personal responsibility issue.
Exactly.
Or if you're drinking a gallon of whiskey and, snorting cocaine and then also doing that substance.
But you're not allowed to say that, though. And it's not only that you're not allowed to say that, they will protect. So this is like a doctor prescribes to patients, take it as prescribed. They do the pill counts or whatever. The patient still is abusing it and buying and selling. and they will protect that patient because they're a victim of the substance. They're a victim of the drug, even though they were the ones taking it not as prescribed. They were selling it. They'll never be arrested for it. They'll never be in trouble, or even not even in trouble, but like made to take personal responsibility. But the doctor will go to prison, and it's the Purdue's fault, and it's everyone's fault but the person. And if you say that, then it's that same, how dare you hate addicts. That's not true at all. I'm not saying that. They
Right.
deserve compassion and kindness and treatment and help. But how is it helpful? How is it that you're protecting? They'll protect the drug dealers too. They'll protect, like, they don't want them in prison. They don't want drug dealers in prison because, it'll harm people who are buying drugs illicitly, and they'll protect the people. And it drives me crazy even with doctors now. So a doctor could get investigated, they'll get in trouble. All the patients who are taking medication as prescribed are going to lose their medication. They'll go abandoned. And the patients who are selling it, nothing happens to them. Like it, and I'm not saying they should go to prison. That's not my point. But like, how is that right? So no one
Right.
has personal responsibility anymore. No one.
Like, it's just critical thinking and common sense doesn't apply at all
No,
to
and they'll
any of this.
right, and they'll say like, "Oh, well, they couldn't pay their bills unless they sold it, so it's the fault of capitalism and this." And I'm like, so you'll do everything. You'll these
Yeah.
mental gymnastics to make that person who made the choice. I'm going to sell this. I'm going to take 12 times as much. I'm going to shoot it up. It's never that person's even shared responsibility. It's always going to be the industry. It's always going to be the vendor. It's always going to be the substance. And anyone else who's taking it the way they're supposed to, when they suffer, oh well, like no,
Yeah.
oh well,
Those people don't matter. It's like
no,
my thing is like, even if it were the case, I don't know. Let's say somebody was allergic to a substance.
yeah,
Let's say 5% of the whole world was allergic to a substance, but it benefited the other 95%. Those 5% of people are just going to win it out, and everybody else is going to suffer because you
yeah,
hear those voices, the 5%
right.
voice is the loudest.
That's why I always say, how come we don't ban peanuts? There's a lot of nut
Right.
allergies in this world.
Yeah.
How come,
Yeah.
like, we're all forced to carry Narcan? How come we're not all forced to carry an EpiPen? How come we're not lobbying to ban all peanut substances everywhere? Because it doesn't make any sense. Like, I thought public health was protecting the whole, even if you sacrifice the individual.
Right.
So, but it's not. It's only when it's like beneficial for them. It's yeah.
Let me go up to this
Very
comment real quick.
extended conversation with an individual who claims to have been saved from his addictions by kratom. And
Yeah.
he said, when I was addicted, he said, I lied to everybody about my addiction. I lied to my parents. I lied to my spouse.
Yeah.
He said, I lied to my family routinely. He said, and I was even in the end lying to myself. He said, I knew I was, and I needed
Yeah.
to be saved. He said, otherwise I'd be dead. And he said, kratom saved him. And this seems to be the kind of thing, and I get it. I have 6 children. I have one child who lied to me consistently about his behaviors. And I got to the point I knew when he was lying every time,
Yeah.
right? If we don't have that radar up, if we don't know that there's a family member that's experiencing a crisis and you want to believe them, you don't extend that belief after they have had the consequential event, whether it's to get into addiction recovery or died. You don't try to blame the wrong thing. And that's unfortunately what happens with many of these families who claim that kratom killed their kid or killed their spouse.
Right.
More and more we're finding out as the truth is uncovered, despite the KDA's attempts to say, don't share any of that information.
Yeah.
As we look at them, we learn more what the parents or the spouses or the family members should know. And you would think that the most important thing that they would want is the truth.
Yeah.
And that would, of course, help them understand and probably grieve better. And I thought it was fascinating to look at the information that was provided in support of the NIH study on purified mitragynine to move forward, finding that it potentially was a beneficial therapy for opioid use disorder, that the predicate for that is that there are people that are using kratom today where they've identified that help them with their kratom with opioid disorders. And why would it be surprising to anyone that someone who lost their journey along the way, overdosed on the opioid, might have kratom in their system?
Exactly. That's a really good point. That's an excellent point. And yeah, that's such a
It's like,
and I can see why parents I have two, they're 18 and 21, two girls. And if I say this all the time, if anything happened to them, like, I don't know that I could even breathe again. Like, so
Yeah.
I have so much like sadness and compassion for people who have lost their children for any reason. But I can also see, if you miss signs as a parent, like, being a parent is hard, as we all know. And if you miss signs as a parent and something happened to your child, like, I would feel tremendously guilty. I think every parent does. And so I can see how that's also appealing to a parent to say, well, it wasn't anything I could have known anyway. It was the fault of, and then they could put all, I'm not saying the parents were at fault at all. I'm not
Right.
saying that, but I'm saying it's probably a way for them to put all of those feelings onto somebody else and say it was all their fault. And not only that, you know, these industries, these litigation industries, they manipulate these parents. Like, I
Yes.
think they're victims
Oh,
of
yeah.
this because they say to them, they do, like, if you do this, you're going to save so many lives, you're going to save other
Right.
parents from having, and it's just not true. And I think at one point they're going to realize that what they're doing is actually harming other children, and like the children. What about children like your kids, Misty? Like, if they took this away, wouldn't your children be harmed? Like, don't
Yeah.
your kids matter?
Right. Right.
Yeah, so they're harming people. They're harming so many people, and one day they're gonna understand that, and it could be stopped now. Like,
See,
are they ever gonna
addiction,
stop? Do you think?
for me, addiction was just a moment in my life. If Kratom was taken away now, I've recovered from my active addiction mindset that I won't go back to the streets.
Yeah.
I won't go backwards in my life. But if Kratom was taken away at a certain moment in my Kratom journey, especially at the beginning, I would have went back to the streets because
Yeah.
I didn't already work on my whys of addiction yet.
Yeah.
There's so many people now, like for me, like I say this all the time. Some people, yes, they don't like that Kratom is being sold in gas stations or smoke shops. But for me, that's where my journey started.
Yeah.
So it means a lot to me to have that product available. Whole leaf Kratom.
Yeah.
708 can get the hell out of here. But
Yeah.
to have that product available for somebody in their desperation, whether they're going in just to help with their withdrawal from whatever they're withdrawing from, or they're like me, they were just like, you know what? Maybe this is the start of something beautiful.
Yeah.
I mean, do you know how many lives Kratom has saved of not just the addiction side, but for people in pain?
Yes.
Even so many, like, when a clinic is shut down, sometimes thousands of patients go abandoned at one time. And not only are they in withdrawal, but their pain is so severe, or people get double mastectomies and they're not given anything but Tylenol. And, people just don't even think about what happens to them after. And Kratom has given people a way to treat their pain where they're not drinking 2 bottles of alcohol a day just to
Yes.
treat their pain.
Exactly.
It saves so many lives. Like, it's the only thing when someone's cut off of their pain medication, and sometimes they're cut off on a super high dose. When they're cut off of their pain medication, Kratom is the only thing that I can offer as a suggestion. And I always say, if you're in a state where it's legal, like, make sure it's
Yeah.
legal. And then I usually say, like, I do recommend the vendors online because, like, just to look at AKA to see, because
Mhm.
I don't know what state, like, I don't know. I wouldn't feel comfortable necessarily telling someone to take a product that's not tested for the same reason as I think things should be tested and regulated. But it saves their lives. It
I mean,
saves
to
so many
those
people's lives.
to the anti-kratom people, I mean, when I got taken off my pain meds, I ended up turning to the bottle, and my life was hell. I mean, I was in the bed. It didn't really manage my pain that well. I mean, I was 2 hours lucid, a day.
Oh,
To those people, they could care less if I'm laying in the bed suffering every day
yeah.
and my kids suffer from not having a mom. Like, they
Yeah.
literally don't care. And to me, like, that's just, I mean, how? Like,
It's
how do
selfish.
you not even blink an eye at the thousands and thousands of people? And, they act like we're all just addicts.
Yeah.
All we want is
Right.
to be able to get up and do laundry, maybe go to the
Take a
grocery store.
shower.
They
Yeah.
don't even treat us like addicts because they have compassion, remove stigma from
True.
addiction.
That's
But when
actually,
it's
yeah.
for pain patients who don't also suffer from addiction, for pain patients, they portray us as selfish and greedy and like, how dare you want that product available knowing all these people have died? Like, you're so selfish. I think the most hated people in this whole space are pain patients who want access to prescription opioids or want access to kratom, because yeah, we're expected to just sacrifice ourselves for
Yeah.
everyone else, in my opinion.
Amen.
Can you guys stay a little bit longer? Because I still have a second question to ask.
I'm good.
Sure.
You good? Okay. All right. Because I saw the lobbyist comment earlier. And so this one, the battle between the Kratom Gals and Mac Haddow has really escalated, and they're calling you sexist, Mac,
Oh my
a
God.
bully, and saying you are lying about their being supporters of 7OH. They keep calling you a lobbyist, like it's different than being an advocate. What do you have to say about all that?
Well, my mother used to tell me all the time that I should tell people that I was a piano player in a bordello rather than a lobbyist. And lobbyists get a bad name, but here's the fact. In order to present to a whether it's federal or state policymakers, you have to be registered in many cases in order to make that representation, unless you're there for yourself. And so anyone who's compensated for being there, being an advocate, is by definition a lobbyist. I think that many people, and it would include, for example, if anyone on the Kratom Gals podcast receive compensation in the form of any kind of payments from a vendor, they're technically going to fall under this rubric of being a lobbyist. But that's really not the issue. I am a lobbyist. I'm also an advocate. When I first got involved in 2016, I thought this was going to be a 3-month lobbying gig for me, and I was out of there, mainly because I expected that the Kratom ban was going to take effect, because never had there been a situation where a DEA recommendation published in the Federal Register was withdrawn when a recommendation was made by the FDA for the scheduling of any substance. I didn't expect it to be there. I told the American Kratom Association that very fact before I signed a contract with them. They kept insisting that they needed me anyway. And so I thought this is a 3-month deal. At the end of that 3 months, I became not only a consumer of Kratom, I became an advocate for it. And since then, I have been in that role. And I think that it's just an excuse to say, oh, Mac Haddow's a lobbyist. What we should be discussing are what's the truth? What's the fact? Now, dealing with the the Kratom Gals, is a little difficult because it is by their construct of their podcast, they're all women. So any criticism that I might offer could be construed as being a sexist. I have 4 daughters and a wife, so I'm outnumbered in my family 5-2. And so I have been in conversations with my daughters and my wife where they have thought that I'm out of touch with reality, and they could easily call me, if they chose to do so, they haven't thankfully, a sexist. I'm not. This is about the issues. It's about an opinion or about a set of beliefs that I have, as opposed. And I think it's a convenient excuse for them to, and Madeline Sklar made her, ridiculous things. So, well, maybe, and she touched it because we're women. No, it's, in my opinion, because you're wrong. And I was simply offering a different viewpoint. And I think the other part about being a bully is really interesting. They had me on in prior episodes discussing Kratom. And then all of a sudden, when the 7OH issue emerged, suddenly, and I said, look, I've heard your podcast. I've heard your support for 7OH. There's some legitimate discussion points that we could have. Mm-hmm. So why don't you let me come on? No, you're not coming on. And I said, okay, understood. I think you should. I think you have the 7OH lobbyists and advocates on regularly. You choose not to do so. Then why don't we have a webinar? And I will invite all of you to come on. And it's no holds barred. You can express any opinion, no prior censorship, because what they said to me is that I had to identify with timestamps what the objectionable comments that they made, and then they would have a phone call that they would record so that
Oh
they
my
could
gosh.
determine what my problems were rather than have an open discussion. So I said, let's have this webinar. Now, where in any of that became a bully, I don't know. I know what a bully is, by the way. And I tell this story often. When I was in 6th grade, I was in a new school system. And my mother pled with me as I was going out the door to my first day at school. She said, Mac, do not get in trouble. Do not get in any kind of trouble. Now, I don't know why my mother would say that to me, but she did. And she said, don't get in trouble, new school. So I go to school and I'm in recess. And the class bully confronted me because I was the new kid and I was not playing ball with them, whatever he thought I should be doing. And he came over and confronted me, started shoving me around. And I told him to stop it. And he beat the hell out of me. But every time he punched me, I heard in my ear my mother saying, Mac, do not get in trouble. So
Oh
I
no.
finally had enough. And by the way, this fellow's name was Chester. And I went back and looked to see if Chester was still alive recently, just for fun. And he is. And I had a conversation with him.
Oh,
But
you did?
I did.
Did he remember? Do you
Oh,
remember?
yes.
meeting you?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes. Here's why I remembered. Finally, I'd had enough. And I said, okay, the bully Chester. I said to him, okay, now let's fight. And he said, oh, well, let's go ask the teacher if we can do that.
Oh,
And so we went to the teacher, and the teacher sees me all bloody from getting beat up, and he put both of us in detention. And in that school system, there was a detention bus, obviously because there's a lot of kids that get thrown in detention.
Clearly.
And I felt this was an unresolved issue. As a 6th grader, I also in my mind said, well, wait a minute, if I'm going to go on the bus, when I get off the bus, I'm not at school anymore. So my mother's admonition and warning no longer applied. So I got off with Chester at his bus stop, which happened to be before mine. And I beat the hell out of him. And I hitchhiked home. And Chester, after that, became my best friend. So
Aw.
Oh,
all through school, reasons,
Aw.
there were occasions when I didn't need him, he would stand up for me. And he was so
Aw.
funny.
I love
And
that
the-
story.
yeah.
So I understand bullying, and I wasn't attempting to bully them in any way. I disagreed with them, and I continue to disagree with them. And here's the differentiating factor. I think they do not appreciate my saying that they are advocates for 7OH. I think they divide in two ways. One, there's one of the co-hosts of that podcast who works for a 7OH manufacturer. She consumes 7OH and she believes in it. Got it. There's another individual who takes 7OH and she believes in it. And she doesn't believe it should be restricted. But all of them to a person or to a female say that they don't want anyone telling them that it should be banned. They're against prohibition. So they say, let's live and let live. Now, I'm okay with that if the products that are being sold as 7OH are sold as 7OH, not as Kratom. That's the first thing. That's ship sale. They're calling them Kratom even today.
yeah.
I also think that if you're manufacturing a 7OH product and you don't register with the FDA and you don't have a facility that's subject to regulation by the FDA, then you're selling crap products. None of them are registered, not a single one. When they describe the manufacturing processes they're using, they're dirty. I mean, when they say they're using highly concentration chlorine and baking soda without quantifying exactly that process, that's a dirty process. And when I say dirty, there's no consistency to it. You could have one batch that ends up with a higher concentration of 7OH than another. There's no quality controls on it. And the only way that you establish a quality control is by registering with the FDA and then submitting to good manufacturing practices, which none of these facilities do because they can't. Because as soon as they register, the FDA shuts them down because the FDA has good evidence that these are dangerous products.
It's like turning yourself in.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So they operate in the gray area. And so the advocacy by the Kratom gals, this live and let live policy, one, terribly disadvantages natural leaf kratom product consumers because you're being exposed to the advertising that is misleading, if not downright deceptive, which is why the state of Missouri Attorney General shut down in the state of Missouri Vince Sanders, who runs American Shaman. This is crazy. They shut him down, and he's agreed to be shut down, but he's willing to sell it anywhere else, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
So there's no controls. And that's why I think the concern should be not live and let live, because it's likely going to be live and let die, because
Yeah.
people are being sold products that have no
Right.
quality controls, no good labeling. And look at what's happening now. They literally are manufacturing products. And at our congressional briefing, and I encourage everyone to go watch it, it's up on our website. The description was made of the products that are out there, 7OH products, that we submitted for testing at the University of Florida lab to determine what the actual content of those products are. Some of those products don't even have 7OH in them. They're purely pseudodoxal, which is a chemical concentration of 7OH, which is highly dangerous, far more dangerous than 7OH, and 7OH itself is dangerous. And then there are some products in there that are they'll have higher levels. All of them are violative of the 2% standard that exists in most of the KCPA states, all of them. And when they say that they're the same as natural kratom, that's a lie.
Yeah.
Now stand on your own. If you have a product that you think meets the criteria for safety, submit it to the FDA, run it through the new dietary ingredient notification process, and be on the market. Kratom manufacturers have done that. Why not 7OH people do it? So none of this is reasonable, and all of it puts consumers at risk. And no one should be advocating for that today. And no one should look to Vince Sanders as their saint, or I better said as the Pied Piper, to march you down to your doom, because that's all he is. When the initial recommendation for scheduling was made by then FDA Commissioner McCary and HHS Commissioner Secretary Kennedy, a distributor on social media asked Vince Sanders, should we pull these products from the market because HHS has now said they're dangerous? And Vince Sanders' response was, no, this is the best advertising we could have. We're going to sell off the shelves. Now, why? Because they're feeding an addiction community that's looking for anything to give them a high.
That's right. Yeah.
And he's interested in the dollar, not on safety. And
why? I'm sorry, go ahead.
The last point. When asked directly by a reporter, is it true that you didn't have any safety data prior to market entry, which is a violation of federal law? And he said, yes, that's true. But we have a record of people consuming it and they haven't died, which is also not true, by the way. But that's what he said. And he said, so in other words, his theory of going on the market is I can put anything out there I want. And then I'm going to say the human consumers are guinea pigs for me.
Yep.
And that's where he is. Now the chickens are coming home to roost, or in this case, 7OH coming. They're going to shut them all down eventually. It's going to take a little time. And I think the DA is going to schedule it. So that's why I have a problem with what they did. I think fundamentally, all of them are nice people. I do. I think they're misguided by their desire to be out there with the 7OH community for whatever reason, whatever motivation, some financial, some not. They're just misleading consumers. And the danger, this is the bottom line. The reason that we see the number of ban proposals in the United States today at the state and local levels is because of 7OH. No other excuse for it. We would have 35 states that have KCPAs today, but for 7OH and the confusion that they've introduced into the public policy debate arena. I've had legislators say, I can't tell the difference. They claim they're the same as. And no matter what I say, once they make that nonsensical argument, then unwinding it within a legislative session where there's no time to really have serious discussions about it thwarts our ability to protect consumers. And that's the biggest problem.
Throw in the media and all that.
Wrong. They're wrong on the policy. And however, personally committed they are to it, they're not accountable for what's happening in the marketplace.
I don't understand why, like we do hear from quite a number of pain patients who have been helped. I'm sure it does help their pain, but it doesn't mean that it's safe if it's not regulated. Why isn't the 7OH industry, whatever you want to call it, why aren't they fighting hard for regulation instead of just pushing, like, all the energy they're putting into like demonizing kratom advocates or whatever? I just don't understand. Why wouldn't they want their product regulated?
There's no science.
But they can push for it. They can, like, there was no science behind kratom either until there was. Like, why aren't they, you know what I mean? Like, why don't they try to invest in doing basically what Mac and experts have done for kratom. Do you know what I mean? Like, why wouldn't they want that?
Well, they do want it. The problem is that the studies that they've done show that their products are dangerous.
Yeah.
That's where they puke on it.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
for example,
That Beagle study.
did a Beagle study, and they designed a study. They wanted to show at the levels at which they were selling, which is a very low level, 7.5 milligrams of 7-OH in a product. They put it into the Beagle population, and the Beagles in the study had serious neurological problems. So in a typical study, you call it off and you say, we're done. We're going to start over again. We're going to redesign. They did a mid-course correction, which ethically should not have been done. And they reduced the dose that was being administered to the Beagles because they were trying to get to the market quickly to justify with the scientific analysis. And from what we can tell from what they published, at the minuscule amount of 7-OH, the dogs still had neurological problems.
Mhm.
So to your point, they can't produce the safety. They would like to be able to do it. They don't have it. And so what that documents is that it is an unsafe product that requires it to be a new drug application, not a dietary or botanical supplement. And that's what they're masquerading as right now.
You know what you know what study they do use for their argument is the 2019 study. They use
it's actually, this is interesting. They referenced the 2016 8-factor analysis that was produced by Jack Henningfield and his crew. Mm-hmm. Then there was a subsequent 2018 8-factor analysis updated in 2021. So they take those 3 8-factor analyses and they use it. They literally testify to legislators. We have 3 8-factor analyses that concluded that 7-OH is safe for human consumption. Now, all 3 of those documents say that 7-OH in its trace amounts that are shown as a metabolite in the plant material that's used to finish products is safe. That's what it says. It doesn't say that these highly concentrated, dangerous products are safe, but they literally want to rely on those 8 factors. They don't have any other science to do it. And the fact that Ms. Ross and other of her cohorts say that, they are deliberately misleading legislators and public health officials saying that nonsense because it's not true. Now, what is true, and they're absolutely right about this, is that 7-OH does occur naturally in the kratom plant material, not in the kratom plant. The kratom plant doesn't have any evidence of 7-OH. It's only when it starts to deteriorate or metabolize under heat when they dry it, because that's the way that it gets to the United States. You can't send leaves because of fungus and mold that occurs in wet leaves that get shipped over here. You have to dry it and powderize it. And what they typically will say, and it's false, is, 7-OH is just a naturally occurring alkaloid in the plant. Not true. It is the result of the drying process. And at that level, the FDA's tested it safe. It doesn't have any significant health adverse event impact threshold, which has now been proven by what the NIH study is doing. And here's the other thing they say. Kratom natural form gets metabolized in your liver into 7-OH. Again, a true statement.
I heard,
not at the levels that are in their products. And that's why there are 2 reasons why they developed their sublingual and chewable tablets. They don't want 7-OH going through the liver because your liver fights it, excretes it. It's like hitting with a freight train. And so the liver is a defense organ in our bodies. And so it just simply breaks it down and tosses it out through your excretion pathways. And it doesn't make it into the levels that they want in the bloodstream to deliver the powerful impacts. Sublingual strips and chewable tablets go right to your brain. It doesn't go through your digestive process. And when you think about the safety factor that's involved here, these 7-OH products are fully activating, as Claudia was trying to blame kratom for, you're activating your mu-opioid receptors, and it goes to the sector of your brain where you get that fast euphoric high. And then
can you overdose on it, and would Narcan reverse an overdose of 7-OH?
Yes to both questions. According to the science that's now evolving, what we know based on NMS Labs, which is the largest forensics toxicology firm in the country, their scientists warned me that part of the problem here is that 7-OH in its chemically manipulated form is highly unstable. And so when a person dies, it's likely washed out of their system, although it caused the death.
Okay.
And so
Interesting.
when they test for it in normal testing methodologies, so what they've done at they're right now doing, and other labs have done it, they've developed a test for 7-OH postmortem, which will identify the level of 7-OH. Even though the 7-OH itself is gone, the artifacts of it are there. And so they've just done sophisticated testing, and now they're proving that people who have ingested the 7-OH products are suffering from overdoses and deaths related directly to 7-OH.
So they can now distinguish like if in toxicology they can now distinguish 7-OH from pure leaf kratom.
Not local labs though, huh, Matt?
No, it's and this is the other problem. It's very expensive.
Yeah.
It's got to get normalized to a way that they can make the test part of their drug panel.
Yeah, because I'm concerned if they do ban 7-OH or schedule it or whatever. I'm concerned for, a lot of pain clinics now pain doctors will test for how do you pronounce it? Mitragynine? Is that
Whatever
what
you call it. I call it mitragynine or mitragynine.
Mitragynine. Yeah. So how will they if they ban it, I'm concerned that anyone who tests positive for that will just be considered taking you know what I mean? Like that they'll just think they're taking 7-OH if there's no way to distinguish.
Well, the flip side of this is what the chemist at the pathologist said at NMS Labs. He said what you're seeing is a over representation in conclusions by medical examiners of kratom being the cause of death because 7-OH isn't identified, and you have a small amount of mitragynine, and they say, oh, so in other words, that 1,000 nanograms per milliliter, which is the threshold of concern that NMS Labs now establishes, not that it kills anyone, that's level of concern. He said, you're going to see that drop dramatically because you're going to see deaths likely caused by 7-OH, not identifiable or quantifiable, and people are going to say, pathologists and coroners are going to say, oh, well, there's 250 nanograms per milliliter. That must have caused the death. So you'll see a spike in false reports of mitragynine causing deaths. And I think we're seeing some of that. Now,
I would think so. When you you said did you have tested, like when you bought 7-OH from different vendors, did you say you had it tested?
Yes.
Are they is there standard between, like if you test pure leaf kratom, there's going to be the same type of alkaloids or whatever in it. But when in 7-OH, is there any kind of standard between vendors, or is there like random stuff, like random chemicals and whatever put in there, fillers or whatever?
Yeah, I think there's a combination of things. One is there's no quality control. So when they say on the label 7.5 milligrams of 7-OH, we're seeing some products have far less than that and some that have far more. One 7.5 milligram tablet, as I remember, was 32.5 milligrams.
Wow. See, that's what I'm concerned about too, because, if you can overdose on it, if it does suppress breathing and you don't know what's in it, like this is why I don't understand why it seems like they would want some regulation, but I guess your answer is it makes sense that they don't have the science behind even regulating it. So
when they testify at hearings, they scream they want regulation, but nobody behind the scenes is putting in that effort to do anything.
That's what confuses me, because you would want, I would think you would want, like, I want it to be regulated because I do hear from people that it has helped them, but I'm scared for those people because you have no idea, because you are starting to hear stories of this person purchased 7-OH online and overdosed and it had illicit fentanyl in it. Now, this is purely anecdotal, and I have that person, I told someone to say to them, like, get the rest of those pills that you bought and get them tested, but they're like, oh, they threw them out. So all of that's anecdotal.
Yeah.
But that's scary to me. Like that's frightening, because if there's no regulation, anyone could put anything in it. And if it seems like it's being geared a lot towards people with addiction, then they would want to do what the heroin dealers did, a bunch of years ago, where they started putting illicit fentanyl in it because it gets people more addicted, right? So why wouldn't they put more of things in it? And that's scary to me.
Yeah, I would not swallow, chew, or snort or
scared.
anything. I would, I've had thousands of dollars of free 7-OH products in my hands, And not
Yeah.
one time did I ever think, let me go try this out to see if all the massive amount of comments and
Yeah.
messages I'm getting, if that's the effects that I'm going to get. I don't want to. You know, I'm
Yeah.
recovered from my addiction.
Yeah.
You know, I'm
I'm
not
happy
trying
to
to
hear
chase
you
the
say
dragon.
that. I'm so happy to hear you say that because, in my opinion, this is just my opinion. Another one of the false narratives is that addiction is a broken brain disease where
Yeah.
you're broken for the rest. There's no evidence to support
Mm-mm.
that it's a disease, but that was something sold. Talk about industry. That was something created by Reckitt Benckiser for selling Suboxone. This is why
Yeah.
Shatterproof has said you have to believe it's a chronic, like relapsing remitting disease. It's just to sell Suboxone. And now people want to come off of Suboxone because they're doing better or it doesn't help them anymore. And they're literally, these doctors are literally taught to tell them not to come off. Like
Yeah.
so many people
It's
reach
to
out to us and
It's to
say
keep
that.
them in that revolving door, is to dumb you
Yeah.
down, is to make
Yeah.
you feel like you are not a powerful human being.
Yeah. There's so many
Everybody,
people. Yes. Yes, Misty. I'm proud of you
everybody
though.
has, thank you.
Here's the
I
product:
am.
7 ohms sublingual strips. Okay, and you could, let's assume for the sake of argument, and I don't think you should, that this is a safe product in the dose. The dose is actually controlled by the strip, right, that you put under your tongue.
Okay.
Like Suboxone.
Yeah, it's an opioid. There's no question. Here's an example of a product. When you buy this product, you have to. It's scored in the fours. So in order to take the dose that they're recommending, you have to break the tablet twice. There are products out there that are scored for 4, but they recommend on the back on the label that it should be 1/8 of a pill.
Mm-hmm.
So who's doing that? Nobody.
Yeah.
And it's not even scored for
Exactly.
that purpose. They don't even
How
expect
do
you
you
to
do that?
but they
Yeah.
say that's what because that's how they're saying they're staying under the thresholds
Mhm.
that states are setting. These people are shysters. They're manipulating the marketplace, and this is why it's so disappointing that the kratom gals don't see the real problem and threat to consumers. And while they're trying, and I will take it for granted that they want to protect consumers as much as I do, they're
Yeah.
not showing it because they're
Yeah.
being misled by these people that are saying, oh, kratom has helped me, or 7-OH has helped me, and it's really saved my life and I should have access to it. Well, if it's a crapshoot every time you buy a product
That's it.
and you don't
Yeah.
know what's in that product, and these test results show it. There was
Right.
one product that was sold as 7-OH that has 0 7-OH and all Sudendoxil in it.
Yeah.
See,
What?
that's
Yeah.
what I'm concerned about. That's what I was wondering because, like, now it has to be like if you are buying it, you would probably want to get it tested at a local lab
Yeah.
or something before you consume it because how do you even know what's in it? Like,
Well, and I don't, as far as bans go, I don't believe that consumers should be, possession should be okay.
Criminalized. Yeah.
Right. Like you shouldn't go to jail just for trying to live, but
correct. I agree.
it's not safe. Like it is having it out over the counter like it is right now. It's just not, it's not safe.
Yeah.
It's just,
When
Yeah.
the home state attorney general, Vince Sanders, which is where a lot of the 7-OH products are manufactured, shuts down the Vince Sanders because of their marketing practices that mislead consumers, that should tell a lot to people that are out there advocating for 7-OH, because the premise of that litigation and the the settlement agreement that they have is based on misrepresenting to consumers. Those are the people that the kratom gals are protecting.
Yeah.
The bottom line is, if the product is tested safe, if it's manufactured in a facility that is FDA registered, and if the good manufacturing practices are in place, and if they're properly manufactured to meet the limits of what the dose or the serving sizes are, fine. None of them, 0 are, not a single one. And so how can you sit there and advocate for that?
Yeah.
Whereas there are some kratom manufacturers that are out there now that shouldn't be. I just got a list of products that were seized by the Arkansas Highway Patrol from the professional basketball player who was arrested in Arkansas and then a couple of weeks later died. I got a list of those products, and every one that he had in his possession comes from a very small manufacturer that doesn't appear to have any FDA registration for their facility, no quality controls, and it doesn't look like it has any GMP practices that are associated with that product. Now, do I defend those people? No. I tell everybody every time I get on podcasts like this, they should be out of business.
yeah.
That's not what the kratom gals are saying. And I get calls from Kratom vendors that say, you're trying to put me out of business. I can't afford to do everything that you're saying you're doing. The big guys can afford that. And I say, if you can't afford to do basic manufacturing quality controls and you can't afford to implement GMP practices and you can't register with the FDA, you should be out of business.
I just don't understand why people hate you for doing your job as protecting
Because
consumers.
they make it sound like, so the way it's portrayed, and I don't like this, is that not just Mac, but anyone, anyone in the kratom like industry, if you want to call it, if they raise concern about 7OH like this, then it will be portrayed as, oh, they're doing that only because it's money out of their pocket. You've heard
Right.
people say
Yeah.
that all the time. It drives me crazy because it's
Me
really
too.
not.
It's
Yeah,
not.
it's not true.
Because I started fighting against 7OH before it even became the industries going against each other.
Yeah.
I started because they were telling you there was a massive influx of comments and private messages I was getting from people.
Yeah.
And I had to put the pieces of the puzzle together, and then the 7OH industry. Sorry, I'm still getting over a cold from DC. I guess I'm
sorry.
sick of politics, Mac. So I forgot where he's even going with that. But so the 7OH industry and the 7OHers want to blame the AKA for the AKA not standing up for the 7OHers.
Yes.
And I tell them all the time, it's called the American Kratom Association, not the Molested Molecule Association.
Yeah.
Why would the AKA fight for 7OH? They are not the same substance.
Yeah. Yeah, but the purpose, the motivation behind fighting for 7OH, to be regulated or banned or whatever anyone's doing, in my opinion, is not because they want more money for themselves. And that's what you hear them say all the time. These mothers from KDA say it all the time, that the only reason, because they'll talk about the two industries like fighting, and they'll say, like, why does the kratom industry not want 7OH? And they'll say, oh, it's because it's money out of their pocket. But that's so not true.
No.
It's not true at all.
No.
These small vendors, the vendors I've talked to, like Jordan and some of the other ones, are so kind.
Most kratom vendors get in it for the right reasons.
They're not doing it to make money. And they'll say, oh, they'll make whatever they want. The only reason they're doing this is money, money, money. They don't care about safety. That's not true, even a little bit, from the people I've spoken to.
Actions speak louder than words.
Yeah. And that goes for the kratom gals as well.
Yeah.
Actions speak louder than words. What action you are not doing to keep kratom legal is speaking louder than what you're saying on your podcast.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's not to say there are no kratom like store owners who aren't in it for the wrong reason and don't mess around. Like, there's always going to be people who are doing the wrong thing, and they should, be shut down for it if they are,
but the majority, the majority, but it's like the complete opposite with 7OH. You know what I'm saying? It's like consumer wise and vendor wise.
All of their marketing is for therapeutic effects that are precluded by the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. And that's part of it. And I think if you step back from the 7OH natural kratom leaf battle, we as advocates and lobbyists.
Bingo, Deborah. Sorry.
Since 2016, have had a tense battle within the community between the small vendors and the large vendors, between who's going to be regulated and who complies and all that. And I think that that early on, when the founder of AKA and its president, Susan Ash, she was a fierce advocate and needs to be obviously recognized for the contribution she made to get this battle started. And I have an enormous affection for her. She separated from the AKA, and there were for reasons that were between the board of directors and her. And they had a dispute about it, and the community fractured a little on that. Now, hopefully we overcame that because we continued to fight for, and I think Susan agrees with the objective we fought for. There were some in the kratom community that believed that Susan was mistreated. That's an issue that can be analyzed, and I know that that the founder of Kratom Science, Brian Gallagher, has particularly been critical of me personally. And I don't know why that is, because we're both from Pittsburgh, and I give him a lot of grace because he's a Pittsburgh native, and I love that part of it. But he felt very strongly, and he's criticized me strongly because of the mistreatment of Susan Ash. I think you set that aside because those personality differences, just like we have today between Madeline Sklar and whatever conjured up bullying and sexist characterization they want to make of me, this isn't about personalities. This is about what our overall objectives are. And I think that that if we can set those, and I know emotions run high, if we can set that stuff aside and look to the core issues that are critical to protecting the safety of American consumers that are using Kratom products, and make sure those products meet the regulatory standards for botanical supplements in the United States, obviously fighting the FDA at every turn to make sure that they don't overregulate us. But when it comes to these chemically manipulated products, we've got to stand tall and say, it doesn't matter how many people got duped into it and how many people actually take these products. If they are a threat for an overdose or a threat of a poorly formulated product, then we need to protect them. And that industry has to go through the FDA processes in order to document their safety, and certainly meet the federal law, which says that you have to have a reasonable basis for safety. That's the bottom line. And
it doesn't even pass the 8-factor analysis.
Right. And that's the distinct difference between, and I made this point, or tried to make this point to Claudia, the difference between 7-OH and natural kratom is that natural kratom does not meet the criteria of the 8-factor analysis. But the actual requirements of the 8-factor analysis for 7-OH are met, right? And I just saw this one comment that popped up, and I want to make sure that we address this. The AKA has developed a GMP program to help bring vendors into compliance. And the comment was just made, some of these small vendors can't afford it.
Yeah,
and
I've heard that.
say, this is hard, but if you can't afford to meet FDA requirements, and all the AKA program is to help you get there, which means that you have to go through an independent third-party inspection, which when the FDA knocks on your door, you had better produce or you're out of business. That's all this is about. And I think it's a misnomer to suggest that, we can't afford to be a part of that program because it's too expensive. It is federal law that says you have to be compliant with good manufacturing practices if you are offering for sale a product like kratom as a botanical or a dietary supplement. So we were trying to help people, and you don't have to qualify with us. You can qualify on your own. The basis of the GMP program is to train and then make the inspection process available to you. But if the FDA comes, there's no grace.
No more kitchen vendors. We don't want any more kitchen vendors. Bedroom vendors. We already got bathtub chemists making 7-OH, putting a bad name on kratom. Amen. So I saw that exchange going on between you and Brian Gallagher at Kratom Science and Madeline and
and X,
Wow. So what do you got to say about that?
And I think Brian must have been taking some Iron City beers, and maybe that's a Pittsburgh beer.
Oh, okay.
He might have been a little bit off. It was pretty strong criticism, and I get it. But I don't hold any ill will towards him. I think that his loyalty and allegiance to Susan Ash is well founded. She should be appreciated for the contribution she made. And I know he's a fierce and strong supporter of hers, as am I, with respect to what she did for the kratom community. I think there's just a little bit of a misunderstanding, and maybe, we don't have the same view of this. But I can tell you that I think we share the same view about wanting to keep natural leaf kratom products on the market. I don't know Brian's view on 7-OH. I haven't asked and haven't seen it. But when Madeline Sklar finds someone who criticizes Mac Haddow and immediately loves it, it tells you a little bit of the animus that she has, which I don't have for her. I think she's a good person. She's just wrong.
This is common social media drama. That's what happens. Anyone who hates Claudia, her haters love. All of a sudden, they're like, they're the best advocate ever.
Yeah, and I can tell you, I'm the nicest person on the planet.
Yeah,
You just don't like somebody because they hate the person that you hate, or they dislike the person that you dislike. But that's what happens on social media.
It does. It does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Social arrangement, no question.
It is,
Yeah,
and
for
it's like,
sure.
the whole beef that Mac and us as well has with the Kratom Gals is, you're a Kratom advocate. Why would you offer up your platform for 708ers to talk about their products?
The only thing I can think is that they really don't possibly fully believe that it's dangerous, or maybe they don't fully understand that, like, if they keep
Malin
pushing,
understands.
she does. Like, it
Yeah.
can cause all Kratom to be banned, though. Like,
That would be like you and Endeavor putting each other on the freaking same podcast
yeah. Oh
or
God.
platform.
Well, and to
Yeah.
be upset about and be called a bully because you wanted to have an open discussion. I've seen you have live open discussions
Yeah.
with people I couldn't believe, like calling you names and stuff like that. But you're always very respectful to them.
Thank you.
And I think that, like, by saying that, they invited you to a phone call where they were going to record it. That's just kind of, having stuff behind closed doors, things can be made up and said. When you have things
And
live
edited.
and in the open and everybody's there I think it's just a better practice.
Yeah, I agree.
Being honest.
I feel like, I'm not saying this about her because I don't know her personally, but I feel like it's lazy debating to
Right.
just fall back to you're misogynist or you're racist or you're this or you're that, instead of talking facts. Like, I don't like that. That's very frustrating.
And just talking crap on social media instead of confronting.
Yeah, talk it through. Yeah, like, most of our haters, they wouldn't come on to talk to us. Like, they talk a big game, but they don't want to talk facts. And really, Kalani doesn't want to talk facts. Like,
Right.
No.
they get mad when you talk facts. They just want to go back to their,
Their comfort
their
zone.
attacks. Yeah, their ad
Yeah.
hominem attacks, because that's what they do best.
Amen.
Yeah.
Amen.
Yeah.
Hey guys, I got to run.
I do too.
Okay, Kentucky, hold on. The Kentucky question. So July 2027, right? There'll be opportunity up until then for the session to advocate in Kentucky.
Absolutely true.
Okay.
We've got that period to have a really reasonable discussion with legislators, rather than let them slip it in at the last day to do what they did.
Okay.
My phone is about to die, so let me say that it has like 1%. But thank you guys so much. Thank you, Matt.
Thank
Let's
you.
be in touch. Whatever we can do, let us know. Okay.
Thank